In the last video, I began looking at verse 600. And verse 600 mentions for the first time the theory of concatenation. And this is not something we've heard before. I doubt whether many Buddhists have heard it before, the theory of concatenation. We've had some verses about no birth. And if we can appreciate what no birth is, we can connect with the world, or we can connect with the stream of experiencing much more directly if we truly appreciate and realize the nature of no birth. It undermines our implicit assumption in the existence of an external physical world. And this is one of the beliefs we live by. The other belief we live by is that there's a me here wandering around this external physical world. And this theory of concatenation, if we can understand how this works, then we undermine this notion of me in an external world. First of all, I'm not too sure about this theory bit. This is an interpolation by the translator, Professor Suzuki. I was thinking that principle of concatenation might be better. But first of all, what is concatenation? It means simply the act of joining together. Yes, that's what my dictionary says. The act of linking together. And this is what we're doing all the time. Let's take a simple example. The example of the constellations in the sky. If we look at the constellation known as the Big Dipper, or constellation of Orion the Archer, what do the stars that make up each constellation have in common? Well, the answer is they have absolutely nothing in common. They've been linked together. They've been concatenated to make a certain shape. It's a way that our ancestors had of finding their way around, both in terms of space. If you're going off on a journey, then the constellations were a way of determining the position of the stars and where you were, and they also give you a sense of time. So the stars, the constellations, are a useful way of finding your way through space and time. But the stars themselves that have been linked together, that have been concatenated, there's nothing in them which lends themselves to being part of a particular constellation. This is something that's been created by the human mind for its own purposes, its own practical purposes. So, well, as I said, I wasn't sure about this theory of concatenation, and I thought maybe it should be the principle of concatenation. But then, if you think about it, the constellations are purely theoretical. They don't exist. So, concatenation produces theoretical aids to getting around. They do not create something that actually exists. Does the constellation Orion actually exist? Well, what does that mean? The stars in it, we can say with a fair degree of certainty, actually exist. But there isn't any such thing as the constellation of Orion, even though that's the reality which is more real for most of us than the actual nature of the stars themselves. So what's that got to do with me? What's that got to do with this implicit assumption that there's something called me wandering around this external stage set known as the world? Well, me is also a result of concatenation. When the early Buddhists tried to examine what this me is, they came up with something known as the skandhas, a list of 5 factors, or stars if you like, and these stars form the constellation known as me. And so what the early Buddhists did was they ignored the constellation and had a look at these individual stars. And there have been various videos where I've covered this on the 5 skandhas. But we can examine right now what is actually going on. And in doing so, we're looking at the 5 stars which make up the constellation of me. Now the list is usually headed by rupa, which is translated as form. And people tend to think, well, that's the body. But it's not. It's not. Form is what attracts the attention, because the body is not something that is going on right now. The body itself is an idea. It's a story. It's part of the external world. What is going on right now is the attention. The attention is being attracted to form. Your attention right now is hopefully being attracted to these words. These words constitute form. Form relates to any of the senses because it's what the attention is drawn to, including thoughts. Thinking is regarded as a sense in this way of thinking. So, form is whatever the attention can be drawn to, and it's normally drawn through perceptions. This is another of the skandhas. So what the attention can be drawn to has got different aspects to it, which can be described in terms of whether it's a visual form, or an oral form, or a tactile form, or a gustatory form, or an olfactory form, or a mental form. So these are the so-called perceptions. They just list the different kinds of quality that the attention be drawn to. And it's drawn to various forms in accordance with a particular pattern that's been set up. And this is samskara. This is what's normally called a psychological disposition, or something along these lines. But what it means is simply that there's a pattern of habitual behavior of the attention. And whatever the attention is drawn to creates thoughts, it stimulates thoughts and feelings. And these thoughts are normally described as consciousness, because we're not simply a camera or a microphone. There's awareness that we're experiencing sights and sounds and so on. And there are feelings associated with these sights and sounds, pleasant or unpleasant feelings. So part of what feeds the pattern, the samskara, is the tendency to want more pleasant feelings and to avoid unpleasant feelings. So this is the dynamic process which is going on. These are the 5 factors, the 5 stars of the constellation of me. And it's a process of concatenation. The principle of concatenation is what allows us to do this. It's rather like discrimination. We discriminate individual things, and then the second part of this discrimination is to join them into patterns. And so here we've got the pattern of me. So the practice for the early Buddhists was just to see these samskaras. Although I think the understanding as it's generally presented is rather crude, and the one that I've presented here I hope is far more practical and meaningful. And I refer you to other videos on the topic, particularly video 13, which is devoted to the skandhas. Video 13. So just to finish off verse 600, the Buddha says, I talk of this conventionally. He's talking about no birth, conventionally, according to the theory of concatenation, and this is not intelligible to the ignorant. So what does the Buddha mean when he says he talks of no birth, conventionally, according to the theory of concatenation? Well, this is what language is. Language is a lot of individual sounds. We can think of each word like a star, which we construct into patterns. This is how language is. Language works according to the theory of concatenation. And this isn't intelligible to the ignorant. In other words, you need to move beyond the pattern of words. When we look at these verses, and I sometimes feel a little bit apologetic because I know how daunting some of these verses might seem because of the language of no birth and causation and being and non-being and so on. But we need to move beyond that. We need to move beyond the constellation of words and direct our attention from the words themselves to what is going on in our immediate experiencing. Otherwise, we are going to just simply be befuddled by the unintelligibility of these notions, of these words. And hopefully these videos are helping you to do this.